In the name of God, our Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Amen. Here we are, Good Shepherd Sunday. It takes me back to my memories of being a youth minister at a church in Jacksonville, Florida, called Good Shepherd. And it was a big deal at that church. And it's a big deal for us as we hear this story in John's Gospel of the Good Shepherd. And it was interesting in our conversation at Reading Between the Lines this week, a weekly Bible study that has just been a great gift to all those who attend and definitely to your clergy who are preparing for a sermon, is that it can sound kind of strident and kind of brittle between who's in and who's out. And we do spend a lot of time as human beings trying to wrestle with who's in and who's out. And I realize that it is just really challenging for humans to realize that we're all a part of the same human family. We all have the same DNA, and yet we always are trying to divide and split. And as I pondered and wondered about how to talk about the Good Shepherd, I wondered, who have been the Good Shepherds? And what is the message? Who has Anne says in her sermon that just resonates with me over time is, who's been Jesus for you this day, this week, this month, this year? Who has been the Good Shepherd? And what are those messages? I had the great privilege of officiating at Barbara Newell's celebration of life this past week. It was at the Seacoast Science Center. It wasn't here. It was there partly because of the pandemic, but also partly because she was one of the founders of that incredible institution here on our seacoast. But one thing that I learned from Barbara, and Barbara, for me, was a good shepherd, is that Barbara told it how it was, at least how she saw it. And one of her family members said, I always had to remember, sometimes it wasn't the delivery that mattered, but it was the message. And Barbara's willingness to speak the truth, her truth, sometimes unvarnished. And what I like to say is that Barbara wasn't nice, but she was always kind. And what I mean by that is that you can be nice and not be honest. Kindness requires honesty. And Barbara was always honest and kind. She taught me to let my yes be yes and my no be no, and to move on. And so I wonder with you, who are the good shepherds of our time? Because I do think that there are a lot of hired hands out there that are doing the work, good work. But when it really comes down to it, are they going to lay down their life? And I've been watching how we interact with each other. And we're not that great at it, to be honest. If we look at the kind of global conversation, is we're more connected than ever through social media and things like that. And yet the way in which we speak to each other through screens and online and is kind of vicious and ugly a lot of times. I watch how we are trying to figure out things as wonderful as the opportunity that the McIntyre building presents in our community. And sometimes it just is pretty ugly. And I don't think that that's our best selves. And yet I also think about what's going on in our country around systemic racism, where we're not really crossing that divide. We're not even having conversations. It's more simultaneous monologues, even in the wake of a verdict that basically held somebody accountable for their actions. This kind of conversation of, instead of it splitting us, how can we bring it together? How do we listen? And so I want to suggest that I am working on looking for good shepherds in my life based on what they do the way Jesus did. If you look at Jesus's life and ministry, it was a drawing in. It was not a splitting experience. So much of Western Christianity specifically, and in general, Christianity throughout history has been about saying, you're out and we're in. Get in line with us and you get into heaven. And if you look at Jesus' ministry, he talked about, I am the way and the truth and the life. He was saying, follow this way, practice a life that is characterized by justice and mercy and love. This drawing in. So I invite you to think about the people in your life that are good shepherds. May we be a church that is about drawing the whole world in, about listening, not about having the answer, but about being a community that is willing to ask the questions. Because what I am kind of getting very in touch with is the idea that we have the answers to all of life's burning questions is a lie. What we have, what is our power as a Christian community, is that we have the privilege and the opportunity to gather, even virtually, and ask the questions that matter. And to listen to people that might differ from us, to understand what it means to walk in the way of love, to be beloved community. It's going to be imperfect. We're going to mess up. It is going to be messy. We're going to have arguments. We're going to have times when we get sideways. And yet, in all things, we have the model of Jesus, who was always drawing people in. So I invite you this week, as you encounter your daily life, how might you pay attention in a way? See where people are drawing in. How might you be the person that draws people in? I had an opportunity this week where there was some contentious behavior. Let's just say it that way. And I was kind of in the middle of it. I was the person who was greatly affected by it, but I was listening, and it was such painful exchange because both sides of this contentious conversation felt like they had been wronged. And I found myself watching it and going, oh, I've been there. Where you're in this situation where you're like, well, it's their fault. And I was aware of how difficult it is for us to kind of take a step back. Because most of us have been taught, just win the argument. But what I'm learning more and more, and I've said this for a long time, but it's becoming integrated into my life in a different way, is that I can win the argument and be right, or I can be in relationship. And what I'm learning is that religion, at its best, is not an invitation to being right. Religion, at its best, is an invitation to relationship. A relationship with our fellow humans that listens first. A relationship with our fellow humans that asks questions instead of always presenting the answer. It is a relationship with our God, the Good Shepherd, who invites us to a way of life that is not one that is proscriptive and says you better or else, but one that invites us to imagine what life characterized by love and mercy and justice can be. Today is Good Shepherd Sunday. I pray that you have good shepherds in your life. I also pray that you may be good shepherd to others. Let us draw people in. Let us listen to the Good Shepherd who calls us each by name. Amen.